My name is Glenn, and I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to to be able to share my story with others and share their experience, strength, and hope. Uh, this is I'm just going to tell you briefly my past, my qualifications, because we all have come to some kind of a qualification that enabled us to join this fellowship. And I really would like to spend more time talking on how it is today with me. Like I said, I'm going to summarize. I was married 3 times. So we'll start with wife number one was Judy. Wife number two was Ginger. Wife number three was Jane. There was Julie in between, and my daughter's name is Jessica. So I have a G problem. I don't know what it is, but it seems that I have a lot of females in my life. I was an electronic engineer. I guess I still am electronic engineer. I'm retired now, but I was making a lot of money, and I was a consultant to the military. So I was walking around telling other people how they should be building things. We were working on F-18 weapon systems and submarine trainers and flight simulators and things like this for the military. And frankly, it was not a rewarding job for me. I mean, I loved the business, I loved the job, but it was very hypocritical. The reason I say that, we were consultants. So there was a time when one of the aircrafts, the F-14, was going from a D model to an E model, and you were upgrading the electronics on it. And we had to write a report justifying that this thing was worth the money that the company said they wanted for each aircraft. And I went with my vice president to the fellow who awards these contracts, a lieutenant commander in the Navy. And my vice president said to him, "Well, what do you want it to smell like? Do you want this or do you not want this?" And I went, "Really?" So here we could take the same data and we could make it like it was the best thing on this earth, or we could make it like it was the worst thing that ever happened. That's when I lost interest in working for that company. I just thought the whole business was not really what I wanted to do. I soon got laid off from that company. I was working for that company for 10 years, and I got laid off, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I went into my noon meeting, and I said, "I got laid off. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I'm in good hands, and I know God is going to take care of me." And for 3 weeks, I looked for a job, and I couldn't find a job. There were 50,000 electronic engineers that were laid off, out of work on Long Island. That's where I used to live, on Long Island. And I was in competition with people with much more credentials than I had. And this was not working. I didn't know what I was going to do. I went back to that noon meeting numerous times, but after 3 weeks of looking for a job, I went back there and I said, "Oh boy, I don't know what I'm going to do. This is really bad." And somebody said, "Don't you remember you said you were in good hands? So you folks told me what I mentioned earlier, that it's going to be okay." And I think that's the message that this program gives us, that it's going to be okay. No matter what happens, it's going to be okay. I was not happy that I was laid off, but I knew I would find something. I felt it would be okay. And as Oscar mentioned a little while ago, it was the start of my recording business. I didn't know it at the time, but I had collected some cassettes. Now, cassettes are these little plastic things. You take a pen to rewind them. I don't know if a few people remember them. But I started collecting cassettes from other guys in my group. I would copy them, and then I had maybe 100 cassettes. And I went to a store, and I said, "Oh, I have these 100 different titles." And these are old timers. I mean, this is Clancy and John the Indian and some old timers. I don't know if some of you people remember those guys, but those are the guys that I was brought up with. And so the woman who owns the store said, "Well, I'll take this one, this one, this one, this one, this one." She checked off 30 of these, really big. And she said, "I'll take 3 of each." I went, "Oh my God, that's wonderful." So that was the beginning of Glen K Audio. I made these cassettes for her. I had to buy a high-speed machine that would allow me to make 3 cassettes every 3 minutes. What I had before was a dual cassette, and it would do it in real time. So a 90-minute tape would take 90 minutes to record. This thing took 3 minutes, and you make 3 at a time. Well, if a little bit is the right amount and more is better, too much has got to be perfect, right? So I ended up buying more and more equipment, more and more tapes. I was buying 100 blank tapes from this one company, Dyco Tapes, in Oklahoma. And then I started buying more and more. And one day I bought 500. That's a case of tapes. And I said, "I have arrived," like Bill. I started going to different conventions, and I went to conventions all over the East Coast. And then I started branching out, and we started making CDs, and then later on MP3s. But, I love to travel. And the job I used to have with this electronic thing afforded me to travel. I was able to travel all over Europe. And it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed traveling. And this new business that I had, just recording conferences, allowed me to travel all over the U.S. We were in Alaska 3 times. We were in Hawaii 3 times a year for 20 years. I mean, I did the taping business for 25 years. So I've heard a lot of good speakers. Everything that I tell you, if any of these things are funny, it's because I copied from other people. They're not mine. They're not original. I don't have any, but like we in AA, we all swap lies and tell each other lies right along in order to help us stay sober one more day. I started to employ people in my home group area. I had an office in my basement where we made cassettes and CDs, and anybody that was out of a job that was in my home group, I said, "Come on over," and I gave them a job. And after a while, they got on their feet, and they went out and got a real job and started working for somebody else. But I loved it. I just loved it. I was blessed to record Joe and Charlie 50 times, over 50 times. As Oscar mentioned before, Joe Hawk, Mark Houston, and many other people doing big book studies. My big book had lines in it. Joe and Charlie, when they do a big book study, it's almost the exact same thing. Oh, they change jokes once in a while. But when he says something like, and it's no surprise that the very next section is more about alcoholism, I know that that's a cue. He's going to go on break, and I stop the CD or the cassettes, and I put on music. on the break time. And then when they come back from break, I would forget that I had the music on, and they would be talking into the mic and nothing was coming out. The music was still on. And then I realized what's happening, and I quick change things and make it so the microphone works. And Charlie always says, lack of power. That was our dilemma. Lack of power. And I kind of picked up on that. I love that line. It's on page 45 of our big book. Lack of power is our dilemma. We had to find a power greater than ourselves, obviously. Where and how are we going to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. I've heard that maybe 100 times. And until one time, I'm doing a big book study in my den, and somebody said, look at that word which. We had to find a power greater than ourselves, which would solve our problem. It was not so I could get power to solve my problem, which is what I thought I read. But it was, I have to find God so God will solve my problem. And I was like, wow. I just didn't get that. And a switch happened. I've had many switches like that in AA. Switches, that is, from my old thinking to my new thinking. Yeah, and matter of fact, that happened. This is my third meeting today, by the way. It's only noon here, but I go to a 6:30 in the morning meeting, and then I go to my home group, my face-to-face home group. My 6:30 meeting is my old home group on Long Island on Zoom, and then 8:30 in the morning on weekends is the lunch bunch group, and they call it the breakfast bunch group. And we were talking about how the switch happens, when all of a sudden we get that, wow, now I understand. And how our program seems to expand at every time. Now, I don't know when it's going to happen. It happens maybe on Monday, maybe it'll happen next week, maybe 2 weeks from now. But it's constantly expanding. I'm constantly building on what I've heard before. It's amazing how that works. And I'm forever grateful because, this program, if it was stagnant, if I read the book like a novel and I knew the ending of the book, I probably wouldn't pick it up again. I like to read Grisham novels. I'm a big Grisham nut. He's a guy who writes about attorneys, and I don't know, it's kind of interesting. But once I've read the book, I don't go back and read it again. But this big book is a living, breathing document that gets better and better and better every time I read it. And we were talking about that today, how the switch happens, I was blessed to, like I said, record Joe and Charlie many times. And then one day, this gal calls me up from the West Coast. She's a travel agent. And she said, listen, I'm booking a cruise with Joe and Charlie. Would you like to go on it? And all you have to do is start an AA meeting every day. I said, yeah, I can do that. She was great. I'll pay for everything. Okay. I've never been on a cruise before. It was a 2-week cruise in the Med. I mean, I went to Istanbul and Egypt, and I went to the pyramids, and I was in Greece. And all the time I'm with Charlie. Joe couldn't make it. He had to cancel. But I was with Charlie and his wife, Barbara, the whole time. And Charlie is just such a wonderful, wonderful man. We would be in Rhodes. That's where they make this wonderful lace. And my wife and Barbara says, oh, let's go into this lace store. I'm not interested in going to a lace store, And Charlie says, we'll wait out here. And then Charlie says to me, I'm going to sit down over here because never stand when you can sit down. Well, okay. And he said, and never sit down when you can lay down. I said, let me write that down. Charlie's filled with these wisdoms. Uh, I just love it. And this is what AA has given me. I've been in all 50 states. Like I said, Alaska 3 times, Hawaii numerous times. I could give tours for Maui, the Big Island, and Oahu. I've been there so many times. My wife and I would spend an extra week there. Now, if you told me when I walked into that meeting after I got laid off and I did this thing, that I'd be traveling all over, that I'd be loving it, I'd be making no money but having a great time, I didn't want to leave that job. I was making more money than I needed. Got me in trouble. But I would never leave that. I would never quit, start a business of my own on a shoestring. But God stepped into my life. You guys introduced me to God. I surrendered, and God showed me a new way of life. That's what happened. And when I look back on it, God was there. Every time there was a great change in my life, God was there. I didn't plan it. If I planned it, God wouldn't be there. I don't do a good job of planning. I started this, like I said, a big book study in my home every Wednesday night. We would meet. I do it now on Zoom. When COVID hit, some 2 years ago, whatever it was, my face-to-face meeting here closed because it was a municipal building. That night, I started Zoom. I've never been on Zoom before. I started a Zoom meeting, and yeah, it was, is it odd or is it God? Joe would always say that. Is it odd or is it God? I did a Joe and Charlie Big Book study in Destin, Florida one time, and I call up the chairperson and I say, who's the speaker Saturday night? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, Joe and Charlie go back to the hotel at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They're done. They're tired and they don't even come back to the meeting, So I thought you would have a speaker. And he says, well, since you're already coming, why don't you be the speaker? I said, okay, sure. So I suit up and show up. I get up on the podium. And who walks in but Joe and Charlie, and they sit down at a table right in front. I'm like, oh, no. Here are these super gurus, as far as I'm concerned, and they're going to listen to my story. So in the middle of my story, I'm talking. I said, yeah, as my good friend Joe always says, is it odd or is it God? And I go about my talk. And then next day, Sunday, I'm recording them. Says, yeah, as my good friend Glenn always says, is it odd or is it God? I went, oh, man. These guys are just the best. They're really, really super people. We had a job in Seattle, Washington, another job in Houston, and 3 weeks apart. And instead of flying all my stuff out and flying my stuff back, and my wife and I taking a trip out there and back, I said, let's do a road trip. Now, my wife went to a couple of psychics before this trip, and the psychic said that we're going to find her new home. I'm like, all right, whatever. Now, my sisters live in Denver, Colorado, and we thought that we were going to move to Denver. So we looked all around Denver, didn't find any place, and we just kind of gave up the idea. We go down to Houston, did the job there. Then we went to New Orleans. My wife has never been there. And we're walking the streets, and there's a bar every 50 feet with different kinds of music. And there was a voodoo guy who does reading. So we went in there, and he says, oh, I see you're going to find a new home. That's the third one. So we said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And they say, well, you have 3 kids. And now I know the guy is full of it because I know I only have 2 kids. right? So we disregarded it. We're coming home and we break down on the interstate and we're right at this town called Greenville, and we fell in love with the town. We had to stay overnight, and we could get a 5-bedroom home on 5 acres of property, wraparound porch with a pond in the back for $150,000, and the taxes were $500 a year. I'm paying $15,000 a year on Long Island. I said, we're moving. That's it. So we moved to Tennessee, and I love it here. I just love it here. Now, I never would have moved if God didn't intervene. And that was my point. You know, just letting go and letting God. We didn't know where we were going to stay, and we looked for property. And my wife said, oh, this is gorgeous. Let's stay here. I said, well, this is the first property we saw. We're not going to stay at the first one. I have to do research. You know, I'm an engineer. Everything's got to be in compartments, right? So we're going to look for 2 more months. So we looked for 2 more months. And then she said, well, let's try this one. So I said, oh, this is perfect. She goes, I know, that's the first one we saw. That's where I said we should stay. So we bought the property, and it's gorgeous. There must be 300 acres behind us that is grazing for cattle. I live in a town that's actually called Chuckey. It's right outside of Greenville. Population is 5,000, 4,000 are cattle. So, I mean, there's nobody here. It's a small, small little town, but we love it. I have the view of the Appalachian Mountains in my back. I never would have found this place if I didn't let go. It's amazing how God is in my life in spite of me. I could go down the road, and this happened just last week. I was in the next town over, and I just passed a store, and my wife calls, and she said, you know, can you stop at that store in that town and pick something up for me? I said, I just passed the store. I'd be happy to. I turn around, go right back in the store. Is it odd or is it God? I don't need to know if it's odd or God. I just need to know that I'm in good hands. He's taking care of me. Guys that are wrestling with their higher power, I tell them to ask yourself, is it odd or is it God? When you have some kind of strange thing happen to you, ask, is it odd or is it God? Write it down in a little book. And when the evidence becomes overwhelming, you realize that there's God in your life. That's how I had to do it. I thought this was a selfish program. You know, it's all about me, 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 me. I was selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, self-serving. Everything it says on page 62, that's me. My picture should be there. But it's not a selfish program. It's a selfless program. I have to be thinking of you, 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 you. I'm pointing to the boxes on the screen. Because when I think of you, I'm not thinking of me. I don't get in trouble. I allow God to run my life. It's a simple little way to do it. My life is so much easier. I was coming home from that same trip that I told you about. I was in the next town. And this gal, a friend of mine, she wanted me to look at her house. She wants to put in a water filtration system that we have here. And I was going to go over it with a friend of mine. And I just call her up. I'm passing by the turnoff for her street. And she said, well, I'm not going to be home tomorrow. I said, well, I was going to come over tomorrow night with a friend of mine, and we were going to take a look at what you have to do. And she said, no, I can't. I'm not going to be here tomorrow night. I'm hosting a surprise party. I said, well, I'm right at your turn. How about tonight? She goes, that would be perfect. Now, I don't know why I thought of calling her. I don't know why I thought of calling her at that moment. But I realized that when when I'm not in control, when I just release that, even making phone calls. When I think of somebody, I call them. When I think it'd be nice for me to do that, I do it. I feel like I'm more God-directed than Glenn-directed. When I'm Glenn-directed, I lead myself into despair and tragedy and harm and everything else. Basically, it's just do the next right thing. It's interesting how this program is just so, but I confuse the crap out of it. I mean, I just want to make it more complicated than it need be. If I make the wrong turn and I'm on a street that I've never been on before, I don't get mad at myself. I stop and I say, why am I on the street? Oh, look at those flowers. I never saw those flowers before. I can't wait to take my wife back here to show her these flowers. That's what happens. When I wear life as a loose garment, and some of these old timers used to say, oh, wear life as a loose garment. I have no idea what they were talking about. That's what they mean. You know, when I just take it easy, just let it flow, my life is so much easier. But I'll tell you what, if a little bit is the right amount and more is better, too much has got to be perfect. That still squirts out in my life. I mean, I switched from drinking a lot of wine, and I used to make my own wine, and it's another story. By the way, September 27th was my last day, my day of infamy, when it caused my crash of a lifetime. And I forgot I was not drinking. And about 13 days later, I had a half a glass of wine with this guy, and I reset my sober date to October 9th. Well, 10/10, that was October 9th. And when I reset, I stopped counting days. I just surrendered. I surrendered my day count. I surrendered everything. I just do this one day at a time. That's all. I know that 6:30 in the morning, I'm getting my daily spiritual vitamin, going to my home group on Zoom. I know that during the week, 12 o'clock, I'm at my lunch bunch group, my face-to-face group. Wednesday, as Donna has showed up a few times, Wednesday is my speaker meeting group I do on Zoom. When I do that, my life is simple, and it just seems to work out perfectly. I used to go to Pennsylvania when I lived on Long Island, and we picked blueberries. And the blueberries were this big, really big. And we have a bucket around our neck tied with a string, and we picked the blueberries and we're eating them. And between the four of us, we picked 50 pounds of blueberries. I bought a little recipe book that tells me how to make blueberry pie, blueberry muffins, blueberry scones. And on the back of the book, there was a recipe on how to make blueberry wine. Well, we made the scones and the pie and the muffins, and it was great. And we decided to make the blueberry wine, and we took a quart jar, put a balloon on top, and when the balloon gets bigger, you burp the balloon, and then gets bigger again until it stops doing that, and then the fermentation is complete, and that's when we drank the wine. And it was delicious. It was like God's gift to mankind. The next year, we picked 50 pounds of blueberries again, but we didn't make any blueberry scones. We didn't make any blueberry pies. We didn't make any blueberry muffins. We just made wine. And I started making more and more wine. And this guy, Giuseppe, the picture I just showed, he showed me how to make grape wine. And like I mentioned, if a little bit is the right amount, more is better. Too much has got to be perfect. It takes two 42-pound boxes of grapes to make a 5-gallon carboy. A carboy is that glass jug that's like on a water cooler. the last day of my drinking, which was in September 1987, just over 36 years ago now, I had enough grapes delivered to my home, 950 bottles of wine. That's 3/4 tons of grapes were delivered to my home. So yeah, if a little bit is the right amount, more is better. Too much is perfect. I can do that with ice cream. In the middle of a blizzard, I went out to the store to buy ice cream. They had it on sale. It was the last day of the sale. You can get 2 half-gallon ice cream for, I don't know, $5 or something. I went, oh, what a wonderful sale that is. So I bought 3 half-gallons. I'm driving home in the blizzard. There's just tire tracks in the road. The plow didn't come through. It's deep snow on Long Island. And I'm thinking, that was a very good sale. And today's the last day of sale. I turned around and I went back and I bought 6 more half-gallons. I figured I'd put them up in the freezer. That way I'll have plenty of ice cream. If a little bit is the right amount, more is better. Too much has got to be perfect. I ate that maybe 8, 10 half-gallons of ice cream in like 3 weeks. I like more of everything. I'm a moraholic. I come for drinking, but I stayed for my thinking. Alcohol was definitely my master. Alcohol definitely ruled my life. When I took one, I wanted to take a dozen. I can't have just one. So, yeah, I'm in the right place. I think we're married now 38 years. We're together for 40 years. I think I found the right woman. Maybe this is a keeper. Maybe I won't have another marriage. So that's all I have, Oscar. I want to thank you. Thank you, Prem. Maybe you'll hear this, but thank you for inviting me. Prem led the meetings at the Lunch Bunch for many, many months when we were in COVID. So thank you, Oscar. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Glenn.